Hello, Frizzle Fighters. Today is a collaboration between me and the booktuber nerdy Nat Reads. I've been watching her videos for years and I love her content, highly recommend it. Today, we are exchanging book recommendations. I gave her a handful, she gave me a handful, and I'm going to be reading them and reviewing them. I'm excited, a little nervous, because some of the things she picked for me aren't things that I was going to pick up by myself. And I'm so excited to take you on the journey of reading Ocean's Echo, even though I knew the end, and Gideon the Ninth. So first I've decided to pick up Ocean's Echo. And I decided to pick up this one first because it's a sci-fi romance, and that's my favorite genre. Exquisite, perfect, let's jump into this book. Nat says of Ocean's Echo, this one is a political sci-fi that made me think, but the characters also kept me so engaged the whole time. They both have so much growth, and there's a slow burn romance as well. And now, halfway through Ocean's Echo, I completely agree. We have two narrators. First, you get introduced to the walking disaster that is 𝐂𝐀𝐏𝐏. He is the nephew of, the president of the planet, and he is just playboy going across the galaxy trying to get away from his responsibilities and make as much trouble as possible. He's a very much not stable individual emotionally, and it makes a really entertaining person to follow. And then at the beginning of this book, he gets tracked down by his aunt's forces and brought back to the capital, where his aunt gives him a terrible sentence for all of his crimes, which is he's got to go out into the galaxy and get mind-linked to a responsible adult. So our Mr. Disaster is like a strong mind reader, and then the person he's supposed to be linked to is like a strong mind controller. So it's basically a death sentence to his mental autonomy as he becomes just a puppet of the other guy. So his future is very much bleak. And that is when we get introduced to our next narrator. Now that we are primed and intrigued to wonder, we get the other guy who is going to be in this mind bond. And he, personality-wise, is like the exact opposite of Mr. Disaster. This is 𝐸𝐸, and he is Mr. Rule Following. He has memorized all of the handbooks, and he also really doesn't like to play the political game, which, despite him being incredibly competent, leads to him getting pretty bad assignments like going out to explore chaotic space on the edges of the galaxy and having to babysit this criminal mind reader guy. And I think what this book does really well is always giving us interesting interpersonal conflicts and keeping up the pace by having those little conflicts resolve and then giving us a new one. Like, for example, 𝐂𝐀𝐏𝐏, our Mr. Disaster, gets to the spaceship post ahead of 𝐸𝐸, and he decides that in his last few days of freedom, he's going to make as much mess as possible, and just spends days getting into trouble and causing fights between other members of the crew. And it's like watching an explosion in motion that I'm just like waiting to see how far he can push it, when he'll get in trouble, when someone will clap back at him, and then how he'll handle that new conflict. Even in just this little span of chapters where the book is kind of spinning its wheels plot-wise, there's still interesting conflict that I'm invested in. And then we get the arrival of Mr. Schedule's 𝐸𝐸, and he quickly realizes that our Mr. Disaster has not agreed to this mind link, and that's actually against regulations. You have to consent. So he refuses to mind link with him. And then we get to follow the conflict around 𝐸𝐸, our Mr. Schedules guy, because he's now like the captain of this ship and he has to take control and find his balance among the crew, gain their respect. So then his conflict becomes how will he adjust to this new post and how will his underlings adjust to him. And then we also have the conflict between them, that they both know that they've been ordered to mind link, but they've decided that they're not going to do it. But then everyone's expecting them to, and they could get in serious trouble with the military if they don't. So then they decide to fake mind sync so that they don't have to face the negative consequences of not actually doing it. So then their relationship becomes this careful balance of like trying to act in public like they've synced their minds and that the Mr. Numbers guy is all in charge, while also having the tension of like, what if they actually do end up mind syncing? And then there's also the interesting plot of them actually doing their jobs on this space exploration mission, where they're going out into the far reaches, and the reason that they've been assigned to this ship is that you can use your mind powers to help navigate. So then they're also having to learn and master a new skill set. And then there's even more internal conflict for 𝐸𝐸 Schedule's guy, because the place that they are exploring is the place that his mother, many decades ago, went and for various political reasons ended up dying. So then he's kind of on the side looking for the wreck of his mother's spaceship and wondering what he might find there. Like, this book, so far, halfway through, it's like perfection. We have such an interesting relationship developing between our two characters, and I am so invested in it. And it's not even romantic. Like, when Nat called this a slow burn, she meant it, because halfway through the book, and there's like no real romance, but it's all focused on the emotional and mental bond between them. I am so invested in that emotional and mental bond, and that is exactly how I like the foundations of my romance stories. And the sci-fi plot is also interesting, fun world building, and I'm invested in it. I had heard about this book before, and I had heard it described as like really political, which is what made me not really excited to pick it up because that just sounded boring. But I think a better way to describe this book is, and mostly focused on internal character conflict and this budding relationship between the two of them. And then on the side, there's the space exploration with some politics mixed in. So, predicted rating for Ocean's Echo, 5 stars. I am breezing through this book and I'm going to finish it very soon. I finished Ocean's Echo, and this book is exactly why I love sci-fi romance and exactly what I am looking for in this genre. One of the things that I was a little worried about when I picked up this book was that, like, how spicy is this book going to get? Because I don't really love reading steamy scenes. And when we open up with one of our characters is carefree playboy, like, I was a little worried, concerned. But this book is like delightfully closed door. Like, in total, the book has like 2 kisses that you don't get till the very end of the book. And like, yes, this is what we need. Because this book focused so much on the emotional and mental bond between the characters throughout the entire book, and that was the foundation for the romance, and then at the end you get like a little kiss, like, yay, they're a couple now. And that's exactly the way that I love stories to be told. Like, focused way more on the love than the lust of a relationship. And I'm not saying that you can't tell a fantastic love story that also has some spicy scenes, but I feel like the spicy scenes are often a crutch to develop the physical sides of the relationship and neglect the emotional sides. And if you just completely take away that crutch, I feel like it almost always produces better, richer stories that I swoon over. Now, in the second half of this book, I also learned why people describe this book as political, because our characters get wrapped up in the beginnings of a civil war that they end up being very invested and meddling in. The exploration mission to the far-off reaches of the galaxy ended up being much more political and important than they expected it to be. And I felt like the politics was done so well, where it was always anchored in our characters, where one of them comes from a very political family and has roots and cares about it because of that, and the other one, the politics are all wrapped up in his mother's ship that crashed on the edge of the galaxy and what she did with her life, so he's very invested in this Civil War brewing as well. So there's like a personal connection. It's not just larger political things that don't really connect back to the characters. One of the things that I loved in the second half of this book is as our Mr. Schedules and Mr. Disaster became more and more of a team together, the relationship got more sticky, not less. It kept giving us new interesting conflicts. Because they really like each other's company, and they make a really good team, but also they're really worried that if they get too close to each other, they'll accidentally mind meld, which they decided that they're not gonna do. But instead, they just keep connecting with each other, keep getting more and more emotionally close, and that causes more and more conflict, as that also brings them closer together psychically. And then we get to see their emotional baggage of dealing with this nascent relationship with each other that they both need to adjust to and prepare themselves for. And the ending of this book was perfect. A teensy bit of bittersweetness, but the perfect amount of happy ending for me, where we wrapped up the political plot lines wonderfully, we wrapped up the romance perfectly. Like, I loved this book, and the more that I read of it, the more that I loved it. I am obsessed with this one. I gave it 5 stars. Nat, thank you so much for this recommendation, because this is exactly my kind of book. The next book that Nat chose for me was Even Though I Knew the End. She says of this one's a fun, fantastical mystery with a fashion bargain involved in a historical setting. It hits classic mystery requirements with some fun twists. The cover is stunning, and I've heard of this book before, and the cover is actually what kind of steered me away from it because it seemed very like moody, tragic vibes, and that's not what I'm generally drawn to. But I'm so glad that Nat recommended this to me because I love fantastical noir mysteries, And that's exactly what this is. We are following a female detective who is on the case of a magical serial killer in 1940s Chicago. And the story starts out where her time is about to run out. A decade ago, she made a deal with a demon, and it gave her a decade left of life. At the end of the week, that demon is going to come and drag her soul down to hell. But then, that demon is very invested with this magical serial killer being caught. So she makes another deal with this demon where if she can catch the serial killer, she gets her soul back. And there's also a subplot where she has a girlfriend partner who she's very devoted to, and this is her main motivation for getting her soul back, because then she can spend more time with her. So the love and relationship is there, but I wouldn't call this novella a romance like I kind of expected based on the cover. It's mostly just shown in the background to demonstrate how much our character, Helen, has to lose. So she's going out with her magical camera trying to find clues. She figures out that the serial killer is ritually sacrificing people in order to gain magic. And it's delightfully noir. The word choices are so careful and particular so that it always gives that feeling that you're in an old-timey movie. And this is just a novella. It's nice and quick. At the beginning, I was feeling 5 stars about it. So hooked. A noir murder mystery trying to catch a magical serial killer on a high-stakes deadline. I love it. It's so fun. And then as I read this novella, my enjoyment of it waned somewhat. Because as she's investigating this book, she runs into a fallen angel who is also trying to solve the serial killer case. And they become partners to solve the case together. And at that point, this book transitions from like murder mystery feeling, where it's really focused in on like the stakes and the investigating, to let's learn about the mythology of how these angels work. And definitely loses a lot of its fast-paced plot and gains a lot of moodiness and just general wallowing in this situation. And when our protagonist Helen is working alongside this fallen angel who has healing powers and who can teleport anywhere, it really zapped a lot of the stakes out of this. Because instead of feeling like, wow, we've got a deadline, we gotta make this happen, it's really high stakes, it's just like, oh, we can just teleport anywhere, oh, you got shot, that's okay, we can just heal you up, and really lost the grounding element that I loved from the beginning of this novella. But I still loved the tone that this book invokes, I love its premise, its protagonist is fun, and I have a whole lot of all the spoiler thoughts on the ending, which I would like to rant to you. So we're going to transition into all the spoilers. If you don't want to hear them, skip ahead to the next book timestamp. I gave, even though I knew the end, 4 stars, but it was almost a 3. And let me tell you why while I rant about the ending of this book. So let's talk about what happens at the end of this book and get into all the messy spoilers and exactly why I think the ending of this novella absolutely fails. So first you need to understand a little bit of spoilery backstory to fully grasp this ending. So we get to find out why Helen sold her soul 10 years ago, and it was for her brother, Ted. Her entire family got in a car accident. Everyone died but her, and she sold her soul to bring back one of them, who she chose, her brother, Ted. Ted, after this incident, is very unhappy with her. He's like, sis, I was in heaven with our family. We were having a great time, and then you yanked me out of heaven and damned yourself to hell in the process for making this deal with a demon. And he's so mad that he doesn't talk to her for like a decade. Okay, so now let's talk about how this novella ends. So all of our characters work together to find the killer. At the end game, we have Helen, her girlfriend Edith, and her brother Ted. And they find that the killer is a fallen angel. And this fallen angel is doing all these human sacrifices in order to gain enough magic to get back into heaven. So very evil, crazy, etc. They get into a big fight with this fallen angel evil killer, and Ted ends up doing the final blow and killing this rogue angel. Yay, everything's done. Helen gets her soul back, she's going to heaven, everything is happy, except Edith, the girlfriend, also dies in this exchange. So our killer, the fallen angel who was crazy, kills Edith. It's very sad. And then our protagonist Helen has a choice, because she can make another deal with her friendly neighborhood demon to bring Edith back from the dead. So if Helen makes this new deal, she goes to hell. The pro is that she yanks her girlfriend out of heaven and they get 10 years together. And Helen decides to do this. And this drove me crazy because this is portrayed in the book as the right decision, and isn't it so lovely that she was willing to sacrifice her soul for her girlfriend? But like, hear me out. Helen could just not make this new deal and be lonely for the rest of her life. Which, assuming she doesn't find love again, but let's just assume Edith is her one, whatever. Because the pro of this option is then they get forever together in heaven. And I'm like, the math is not mathing. You get 10 years together and then forever apart, or a few decades apart and then together forever. And like, why would this first option be the correct decision? Well, this book throws in a reason, which is this way, where Helen is going to hell, she also gets to spend hell forever with her brother, Ted. And you might be thinking, like, why is Ted all of a sudden going to hell? Which was also my reaction, because, like, he's a great person, he already went to heaven once and then Helen yanked him back. Like, here's the reason. Because earlier in this scene, Ted killed an angel. And then Helen is just like, well, you killed an angel. It's the rule that we never established at any point in this book that if you kill an angel, you automatically go to hell. And I'm like, can't we get some, what? I think that there are some extenuating circumstances. Like the angel is a crazy fallen serial killer. Like Ted was literally doing it out of both self-defense and defending his sister. Like in what morality system is this a hell-worthy offense? Automatically, no doubt in your mind. Like she doesn't stop to think about it. She just assumes that this thing is true and then makes another deal with the demon. So like, Helen choosing to make the deal only kind of makes sense as the right option if she really is going to hell to keep Ted company. But Ted going to hell doesn't make sense to me. And it bothers me so much on both this doesn't make logical sense, like in no morality system is someone like, yep, no doubt in my mind, that one's the evil one. But also doesn't really work in a storytelling capacity, where they didn't establish beforehand that there was this loophole that if you kill any angel, you automatically go to hell. It was just something that felt really pulled out of the hat at the last second and completely unsatisfying. And what bothered me so much is the end of this book is like celebrating this choice. Like, yay, they get 10 years together. How lovely, how wonderful, love conquers all. And I'm like, but you could have had forever together in heaven? And it feels like such a selfish choice for our protagonist, Helen, to make. Like, she yanks Edith out of her afterlife in heaven, which we already established with Ted is a thing that people don't like. So not only is she doing this to Edith without like Edith's consent or her wanting this at all, but she's also stealing from Edith their potential forever in heaven together. And Edith is just like, wow, you must have been so lonely to make that decision. I guess we're gonna make the most of the next decade. And that's where the title comes into play, that's like, even though I knew the end, that we only had this decade together until the demon dragged me down to hell again, we were gonna make the most of it and it was gonna be the best decade ever. It felt like the author just wanted this ending and then contorted the story to like make it happen, but it didn't actually fit with like the themes or character development of the story. Because I felt like when I was reading this book, part of Helen's character development was talking with her brother Ted and like understanding that he really didn't like it when she yanked him out of heaven and sold her soul to do it. But no, we have to have her doing the sacrifice of her soul for her lover because love conquers all. Okay, get this. Imagine if Helen, having learned from her mistake of doing this exact same deal with the demon and it not turning out too well 10 years ago, decides to not do it again, showing her character development that she's really listening to the feedback she's received by someone she did this to before. And instead of sacrificing her soul for 10 years, she decides to bite the bullet and be lonely for the rest of her life, which is also a sacrifice, that she's choosing to live without Edith so that they can both have a better time together later. The main theme of this book and its beating heart is that she's fighting the whole book for staying with her love. And it feels so weak and cheap to me that the ending has her fighting for her love in a way that leads to like a worse outcome for both of them. It just feels like so obviously a mistake to me. And I could give a whole rant also about the use of Christianity in this book. I'll just give you the spark notes here, where like it very clearly establishes that they're working within the realms of Christianity, folklore, and religion, where they are literally exorcising demons in the name of Christ, okay? And then kind of the whole idea of the religion of Christianity is that it's not like you make one mistake, then you're automatically going to hell, no take backsies. The entire kind of point of the religion of Christianity is because of the sacrifice and power of Christ. Even though you've made mistakes, you can still go to heaven. So then the fact that the entire ending of this book hinges on the fact that because Ted did this one thing that killed the very evil fallen angel in self-defense, that he's automatically going to hell and there's no take backsies and nothing else can happen. If you're going to bring in the themes and religion structure of Christianity into your book, I feel like you actually have to use the religion and themes of Christianity in your book, and this like failed so fundamentally at that, where this feels like the kind of thing that Jesus could have covered, you know? So you might be thinking, Chloe, if you hated this ending so much, why did you still give this book 4 stars? I feel like the beginning third of this book, I was feeling 5 stars. Middle third of this book, I was feeling like 4 stars. And then the very ending, like the last chapter of this book, maybe like 2 stars. And I feel like they all kind of average out to around 3.5, and I'll round it up to 4. So it's short and it's fun. And if you're looking for a detective noir novella with lots of angel mythology in it, with a female protagonist, like, yeah, I think I'd recommend it. But like, this ending chapter needs to be rewritten so much in my opinion, because I hated it. Okay, let's jump in to the next book that Nat picked for me. I have started book 3, Gideon the Ninth. I have heard so much about this book. It's been popular for years. And of all the reviews I've ever heard of this book, I've never heard one that made me want to pick it up. But now Nat is making me read it, for better or for worse. I just feel like all the reviews I've ever heard about this are just like, wow, this was so fun and quirky and such a blast, and it felt like a meme. And like, that doesn't make me want to read the book. I'm like, what about a character arc? Is there a plot to this book? All I've heard is that the tagline is like, lesbian necromancers explore a haunted house in space. And I'm like, that's not a conflict. That's just an atmosphere. And I need a little bit more than an atmosphere in my book. So I've just always stayed away from this one. But here I am, starting the book. What Nat said about this one is, I think you'd enjoy this one based on the fact that it's character-focused sci-fi. And I do love character-focused sci-fi. We'll see if I feel like this one is, because from the reviews I've heard of it, it doesn't seem like it, but I am so happy to be proven wrong. But also, the world building in this is so clever, and I definitely think you can appreciate how it builds out. I do love clever world building. And the plot actually evolves into a locked room murder mystery too. So the way that she pitches this makes me very excited to read the book. It's not how I've heard like anyone else really pitch it. So how am I feeling about this? I'm 15% in. I really love how this author writes, and I would pick up another book by her in a heartbeat. But I'm not loving our point of view character, where the author is writing with an expansive vocabulary, always pulling in these interesting metaphors and like really vivid imagery. And I just love how this author puts together words. But we are following the point of view of a woman named Gideon. She is pretty much a slave to this royal necromancer house. And the necromancer house has been invited to compete in this prestigious competition that spans the galaxy. The people going to participate are the lady of the house, who is a very talented necromancer, and Gideon, who is a very talented swords fighter. Gideon doesn't really want to do this because she doesn't want to do anything with the lady of the house. They are enemies down to the bone. But she's convinced to do it because she's promised her freedom at the end of it. And what she wants more than anything else is to get out of there. The characters in this book speak in a very like an epic fantasy kind of cadence with like throwing in beholds every now and then kind of thing. Except for Gideon. Gideon's the type of character who's throwing in like dick jokes every now and then. And honestly, it's getting kind of grating and annoying. Which is where the part of me that doesn't like this narrator is coming in. Gideon just feels like the epitome of like a rebel against the system who is a constant comic relief, and it doesn't feel like she has that much depth to her, honestly. What's pulling me through this book, again, is the writing style, because this author can craft a paragraph. I love it. Except when it's just kind of the stale jokes over and over, and Gideon just being annoying over and over. They're just now arriving at the competition and starting to meet the other players, so we'll see how that all shakes out. According to Nat, it will evolve into a locked room mystery. And I'm also excited to see the development of the relationship between Harrow, the lady of the house, and our protagonist Gideon, because right now, They are like right on the edge of killing each other. They hate each other's guts. And then apparently, because I've heard other reviews of this, they become a couple by the end of the book. And I do love, myself, the dynamic of going from enemies to lovers. I feel like it can create some really fun conflicts and tension between the characters. So, predicted rating right now, I'm gonna optimistically say 4 stars. And even though I have some reservations about this book, I really do think that this author is incredibly skilled, and I'm excited to see what she does with this setup and these characters. I'm 60% into Gideon the Ninth, and let me give you the update. I'm bored and confused. Though I still do love the writing style, and I think I'm going to finish the book. There's a few reasons why I'm bored and confused. Let's start with the first one, which is our narrator, Gideon herself. The role that she serves in this story is comic relief. She's the funny one paired with Harrow, her nemesis and partner's straight man. She is the one cracking jokes and offering witticisms. And I feel like she has no depth that she's really shown so far, or seriousness, and it's making it really hard to relate to her. Like, it doesn't feel like she has any internal conflict, because it doesn't feel like she has much of internal anything. She's just kind of like, I will stab things with sword and flirt with these hot chicks around me. Now, there is one plotline with her which I am enjoying, which is her uncertainty with the blossoming relationship between her and Harrow. They started out the book absolutely hating each other's guts, total nemesis. And then throughout these chapters, their relationship has grown and they've started becoming unlikely allies. Doing things like helping each other, saying a single nice thing, offering a hug of comfort. And that's entertaining, and I'm excited to see where this goes because it's like the one dynamic thing that's happening in the plot right now. The rest of the plot just feels kind of like sitting around waiting for something to happen. They arrive in this spooky abandoned facility with a bunch of other competitors, which I'll get into in a minute, and they are given no task. But it is a competition, somehow, between all of them. What are they competing to do? They don't know, and I don't know. And, like, for so long, this book was just spinning its wheels with them just kind of, like, interacting. And then finally, we get to the part that Nat pitched, where this book turns into a locked room murder mystery. So far, we've had, I think, 4 deaths and 1 mysterious disappearance, which is probably another death. And it does have those fun mystery vibes, where they're not quite sure if it is one of the fellow competitors that is killing people off, or if it is a evil ghost haunting this facility, killing people off. Like any good murder mystery, this book has a very large cast, so you have lots of suspects, because just at this facility we have around 20 people. And that is exactly where, especially in an audiobook, everything is breaking down because the cast is too big and there's no way to really keep track of them. If I was reading the physical book, I could flip to the character list, but I'm not, and I am not listening to the character list every single time I'm confused, which is like every single page. Because every single character has like 5 names, and they're all used, and I have no idea who anyone is. Every character has a first name, a last name, a number for which planet number they're from, a title, and like physical attributes. So in one scene, a character will be referred to as the necromancer from planet 7, and then in the next scene, they'll be referred to as their golden hair. There's like 20 of them, and when you give everyone 5 names, that means that functionally there's 100 of them, and I cannot keep track of that many characters. I am so confused in every single scene how many characters are even in that scene. Like, for example, Gideon has a crush on one of the ladies, or maybe 3 of the ladies, and I'm really unsure which one that is, and that's a problem. And the problem becomes that the book will tell me, like, the competitors from planet 3 have died, and I'm like, who were they again? Were they the nice ones, or the mean ones, or were they the teenagers, or the old person, or the zombie, or the death has absolutely no impact because I have no frame of reference for who even died. And even worse is that I have no frame of reference for who the remaining suspects are. Like, I couldn't tell you how many people are left alive. So how am I supposed to get invested in this investigation of the murder mystery when I can't keep track of who is dying, who the suspects are, or who is saying any line of dialogue, doing anything, or in any scene? And I feel like this could work if our narrator was less of a himbo. Like, Gideon, you gotta love her. She's a total himbo. she's not thinking through the suspect pool and guiding me and helping figure out who's even alive. I wish I had some more hand-holding in this mystery because I don't know what's going on in this book right now. And I need that info to care about what's happening in this plot. I'm remembering the audiobook of another murder mystery called The Devil and the Dark Water, and that one also had a very large cast where lots of people had lots of names and titles. But what they did for the audiobook is they simplified everyone's name. So maybe in the physical book, everyone's getting referred to by different names, first, last, title, but then in the audiobook, they just picked one for every character and stuck with it. And then that was very manageable and you could totally figure it out. And I think this audiobook, which is wonderfully narrated and acted, could have also benefited from that name simplification. So like, I very much get it when people say this series is confusing. And I think if it just had a little bit more hand-holding with the important characters, with paring down and not describing every single character by first name, last name, number, title, and physical attributes, and maybe just picked like 2 for every character, then I could probably know what was actually going on. Then I could probably know how many characters were even in the scene, or who Gideon has a crush on, or who is our top suspect for the murderer. But right now, I am running on 0 frame of reference and not really enjoying the time of it. So I think I'm gonna give a predicted rating of 3 stars. So I have finished Gideon the Ninth. In the ending of the book, as more and more of our characters got killed off, it did become slightly easier to keep track of all the characters, so that was good. Until at the end, when they finally revealed who the murderer was, I actually, knew who they were, mostly, which felt very gratifying. The ending was big. It was wild. It was action-packed. We pivoted from exploring a haunted house with a little bit of murder mystery into full action scenes so quick. And they were fun and had some interesting character beats interweaved with them. I definitely feel like the ending is the strongest part of this novel by far. But I don't think I loved the twist ending. And if you've read it, you probably know which ending I'm talking about. It makes me intrigued to read the next books in the series, but I don't think I will. Because though I overall liked my experience with Gideon the Ninth, I didn't really love it enough to continue on. For example, I never really got settled with the setting. It's necromancers exploring a haunted house, but also it's in space. It's a sci-fi world. But then the sci-fi-ness is so much in the background that I kept forgetting that we were even supposed to be in a sci-fi setting. And then a character would flick on a light switch, and every single time something like that happened, I would be surprised. I'd be like, oh yeah, they just have light switches. What? What? And it just felt so against what everything else in the setting was giving me. And I never really felt like I could really understand where they were and what kind of environment they were in. Looking through the reviews of this book, it's quite polarizing, and it seems to be 2 camps. The camp of people that says, this book is lesbian necromancers explore a haunted house in space, what more could you need? And then the group of people that say, yeah, actually we needed more. It's such an intensely atmosphere-driven book where it just is running on the vibes, on the comedy, on you loving this charismatic main character, and not necessarily running on having internal conflict or a character arc or a compelling plot. It's like the book is trying to be more entertaining than it is engrossing. And if that's the kind of book you're looking for, then you could love it, but I don't think I'm one of those people. So I think I'm going to give Gideon the Ninth 3 stars, which makes this video in total a 5-star, a 4-star, and a 3-star, which is fantastic. That's an average of 4 stars. That's so much higher than my typical average of just picking up books that I usually do. This video I consider to be such a success. I found a new 5-star in Ocean's Echo. That's awesome. Not going to lie, I went into Ocean's Echo with some pretty low expectations and it blew me out of the water. I loved that one. And even though I didn't love as much the other 2 books of this video, they were still solid and I think very fair and insightful recommendations for me, where they do include a lot of elements of the kinds of books that I like. And if you liked this video, I highly recommend you watch this one next, where Nat reads recommendations from me. I'm also very excited to watch that video.